Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very senior and successful entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and a corporate leader, as well as a fellow member of the YPO from Dubai, UAE, Mr. Binoy R. Meghraj. Binoy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Binoy is the Vice Chairman and Managing Director of the Meghraj Group. And as I just mentioned, he's a fellow member of the YPO. So Binoy, let's talk about your group. Tell me about the origins and growth of the group.
Thank you. Ashutosh, Meghraj Group it's a family business that was started by my grandfather in 1922. So we're actually celebrating our centennial year this year.
Wow.
He was part of a group that emigrated from Gujarat to Kenya. Mm-hmm. So he emigrated there in 1919, began the business in 1922 when he was 18. And the business, when it started, was in wholesaling and then retailing. He quite quickly moved into industry and manufacturing, and then into trading and finance. So he got into a bunch of different businesses, but rather unusually, when he was 49, he essentially retired from the active management of his businesses and focused the rest of his life on charity and social contribution.
Okay.
In the process of that, he shifted the family in 1957 to London. And so the UK has been our base, or our headquarters since that time. He passed away when he was very young. He was 59. And my father and uncle, Vipin and Anand, were still students at the time. So once they had finished their studies, he had left them some capital. I mean, the remnants of what he hadn't put into his charity. And so using that, they started the second iteration of our business, which is very much focused on financial services. So they built up a business which included Meghraj Bank in London and Minerva Trust Company in Jersey, in the Channel Islands. I joined the business straight after university, and quite soon after that, I got involved in helping to set up Meghraj, what is now Meghraj Capital, which is an investment banking business. So we've grown and evolved, and we've actually simplified. We've been recently simplifying the business. So now there are two main businesses that we're focusing on. One is Meghraj Capital. So we do investment banking advisory business. We started that company in India, and now we have offices also in Kenya and Japan, Dubai and the UK. We focus a lot on cross-border transactions for clients. And then we have a trust business. There's an onshore trust business in Kenya called MTC. And then the international trust business that we started in the 1970s has grown through M&A and merged into a larger trust business about 3 or 4 years ago. So that's a brief sort of history of the group. But a couple of things I would probably wish to highlight, particularly about my grandfather, is his level of foresight. A lot of things that we might talk about these days and start to take for granted these days are things that he had identified as being issues or being important, in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. So things like, not giving all of your wealth to your family and actually focusing on charity and giving a substantial part to charity, being unsentimental about businesses. He thought nothing about selling businesses if that made sense for him. And indeed, finding good professional managers and professionalizing businesses. I know that's something typical family businesses still think about and challenge with today.
Correct.
But my grandfather was quite comfortable with that, very, very early on.
I agree, and I mean, for him to have thought about it in the 50s and started charity work is absolutely amazing. And congratulations on the centenary year that you're going through right now.
Very kind.
But, Binoy, let's talk a little bit about your charitable foundation. When did you start the foundation, and what was your motivation to start it?
Okay. So really, I think as the business has evolved over these 100 years, really from relatively early on, we've been doing charity concurrently with that. So my grandfather actually started making his donations when he was in his 20s. And at that time, he built a school in his local native village in Gujarat. And as I said, he retired from active management of his business at 49, and sold most of his businesses. And after that, most of his time, energy, and money was focused on charity. So that, in one shape or form, I suppose the charitable activities have been going on for probably 90 years or so, but with a stronger focus, let's say, in the last 50 years. My grandfather took two particular themes as being most important for him. One was education, and the other was healthcare. And focusing on these, he gave donations to build more than 100 schools, colleges, hospitals, libraries, and hospitals, primarily in India and Kenya, and within India, most of it in Gujarat. So some examples of institutions that he's built include the MP Shah Medical College in Jamnagar, the MP Shah Commerce College in Jamnagar, and the MP Shah Hospital in Nairobi. He's always done these as donations. So, he's never run the institutions. They were always built and then run by the government or run by a local charitable trust. So we've never had control over these. It's really about building something which will impact the local communities. The foundations as they exist now, we have one foundation in India, one foundation outside, essentially are extensions of the work that my grandfather did. So we're really just continuing to focus on healthcare, continuing to focus on education. And I think in terms of motivation, my grandfather's motivation, which remains our motivation, is we're very conscious of how fortunate we've been, how blessed we've been. And there are many, many people in very, very different circumstances. And we feel a very strong responsibility to try and support other people, help other people, give other people opportunities which perhaps we had and which they haven't had. So it's really, in a sense, trying to equalize things a little bit.
It's incredible hearing you speak about this, because I marvel at your grandfather's vision and his foresight. Because if you were to wear your Meghraj Capital hat, the areas of education and healthcare are today the hottest sectors to invest in. And he seems to have thought about it many, many decades ago. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's going to be.
Tell me also, Binoy, how do you prioritize the areas you want to focus on?
Yeah, that's really a very interesting question, and it actually a very deep question as well. Geographically, we tend to focus on India and Kenya. And I think, frankly speaking, there's a lot of sentimentality around that. Our family, our business has started in these places. We have a lot of attachment to them. But in addition, I think we're always very conscious about the bang for the buck you get in different places. And I think for each dollar spent in these countries, you can actually have a relatively meaningful impact. So I think that's one of, geographically, that's where we focus. We continue in terms of sectors to focus on healthcare and education, because we do feel that there is a lot that one can do by extending life, improving the quality of life. It has a major impact. And with education, we see in the countries where we're making donations, a lot of people that may not have a lot of opportunities, if they're able to educate their children, and their children are able to get better jobs than they were able to do, it's a way of changing the trajectory for a whole family. And we're very conscious of that. I think we certainly, and I'm sure it's the same for you, have seen examples of people who saved money, been able to educate their children have gotten good jobs, and that's changed the dynamic for the family. So that's, education is naturally very important for us.
Correct.
We want to see projects which are long-term, which have a sustainable impact, and which can create some kind of scalability as well, so that it can impact a family and a local community beyond that. And I think the fact that some of these institutions, many of the institutions my grandfather built, remain to this day and having an impact to this day, show that if you get your foundations right, if you build something which has got value to the local communities, it can have really a very extended impact.
Very interesting. And as you have been building so many centers across different parts of the world, What have been some of your challenges and some of your learnings as you have built this foundation?
Yeah, that's interesting. And actually, in terms of challenge, let me go back to your question about prioritization. I think that links up very clearly, very distinctly with the biggest challenge, which is actually how do you use your donations effectively? You have X amount of money which you want to donate, but you want it to do good, and how do you figure out where to allocate it? It is not a trivial exercise to deploy funds effectively, and to do it in a way which gives a meaningful contribution. So we spend time thinking about this, and it can actually become quite philosophical. I mean, there's a lot of introspection that goes into that. So I think that's, has to be by far the biggest challenge. How do we really work and operate in an effective way? Another challenge, one which we have less of an impact or less of an influence over, is that some of the organizations we build, particularly if they become quite visible in their communities, can become a little bit political. And because we don't have any ownership interest, we don't have any say essentially over them, it can get a little frustrating seeing politics detracting from the influence that they might be able to have otherwise. So there's a couple of challenges. In terms of learning, I think, and again, this links to the theme we've mentioned twice already, which is about how to maximize the impact of the donations. So, we are thinking more about that, trying to think what we can do, maybe become more quantitative in our assessment of what we do. Personally, I've been very influenced by Peter Singer's essay, Famine, Affluence, and Morality, and the effective altruism movement that sort of that stemmed from that essay. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that, and I think over the coming years that is going to impact how we do donations, and actually it's impacting personal decisions that I make on a daily basis as well. I think another important learning is it's not just about money. One can contribute a lot more than that. And giving time, sharing some of your business experience, maybe some of your relationships, can also be very useful for organizations. So we want to give time and money together.
Correct.
I got involved during COVID actually in co-founding a not-for-profit focused on climate change. And there, it's not an area that I've got particular experience in, but actually I found a lot of the other experiences I've had on the business side were actually became quite relevant and were able to contribute to that organization.
Quite amazing.
So there is more to it than that.
Absolutely. Quite amazing the amount of work you are doing in so many different countries. And that is a good segue for me to move to the next set of questions, because not only are you managing your foundation, but you're managing it across multiple countries. I want to talk to you for the next few minutes about culture.
Okay.
You work in several countries. What are the challenges you face in managing across different cultures?
Yes, this is interesting actually, and something which I spend far more of my time on than I would have anticipated as an investment banker having to do. So our business is quite international. We have cultural diversity internally and externally. So managing that is a very real issue for us. I guess there are two main aspects to it. One is internal, which is how we get our team working effectively together.
Correct.
And the other is external in terms of clients and counterparties and market participants. So I guess there are 5 main markets that we're operating in when we have team members. We have India, Kenya, Japan, the UK, and Dubai. There is some amount of overlap, but there's also a significant amount of difference between these various locations. In terms of the internal dimension, I think I'm very happy to say that we've got a good team of people who have come from diverse nationalities, different backgrounds. We have people with experience in multinational companies, people working outside of their home country or having studied outside of their home country. So the raw material in that sense is quite multicultural. But the internal challenges that we need to address communication is a very important one.
Mm.
When we speak to each other, we need to give each other enough space, but we need to understand the messages. And the messages are not just what was said, but also what was not said. And in some cultures, more is unsaid, perhaps, than is said.
Correct.
So one needs to be able to read into that and understand that.
Yeah.
I think appreciating, when our team members are going out into the market, when they're talking to other people in their countries, they may not be able to do that in the same way that we can in our home country. So we need to give space for that as well. Behavioral norms, of course, vary by country. So these are all challenges. I think the key thing is that our team accepts them. They know that they're coming into a multicultural environment, and they are curious about them. They want to explore that. So I think there is a key point about fit when we're recruiting people. When it comes to the external side and working with clients, it is quite complicated, because the sort of work we're doing for clients, on M&A transactions and things of that nature, culture does become a very important part of the work that we're doing. So, we need to be very deliberate in our communication with our clients. We need to take them through the process. We need to spend time helping them to understand and communicate with them about what the sorts of issues are. The kinds of issues, the kinds of challenges which can arise include around management, decision-making, how power dynamics in country A differ versus your own country, communication styles, things of that nature. So what we really want to do is to be able to help our clients understand a realistic picture of what is going on, and the sorts of challenges they may face in transactions that they're doing. So, as I said, it was quite unexpected for me as an investment banker to spend so much time thinking about culture. But I think that actually it's ended up giving us a competitive advantage as an organization. We've done a lot of work, for example, advising Japanese companies on M&A transactions and partner searches in India. And we've realized that you actually need to create a cultural bridge, a safe space, a space of trust, where both sides are understanding each other in order to allow transactions to move ahead effectively. And without that, even if there's a good business case, it is quite probable that a transaction will not move ahead. So we've tried to turn that into a competitive advantage for ourselves.
Very interesting. And I love this term, to build a cultural bridge. I've not heard this term very often, and fascinating on how you build cultural bridges with your teams. But my next question to you, Binoy, is on culture impacting leadership and teams. And given the size of your group and the diversity, how do you manage, the culture, across leadership and across your teams?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there are two elements of it. One is, as I said, there's a certain amount of selection when we pick people to join the team. They need to be open to other cultures. They need ideally to have experience in other cultures, and they need to be open to learning by experience and through osmosis, by interacting with their peers. But I think there are a couple of key things. We try not to have a cultural domination across the organization. It's not that one culture should dominate the others. Each office should respect and work under its own culture, but needs to be open to working with clients from other places and imbibing other culture when they're working with team members and clients. That said, these are predominantly geographic cultural elements.
Right.
That said, we have some overriding values of the organization. Being multicultural is one of them, but things like respect for relationships, being very long-term in what we're doing, integrity, these sorts of things. These trump everything else. So those are not for negotiation. Every member of the team needs to follow those. But then at the next level down, in terms of let's say geographic culture, we try not to dominate any office, and let each office operate the way that it would normally under the overriding ones. But everybody has to be open.
Very interesting. So I have time for two more questions.
Okay.
And my next question is on technology.
Okay.
I'd love to get your perspective on how you are using technology to manage across cultures and countries. And also, how are you using technology to manage your foundation?
Okay. Okay. So we're old. We're not sort of hugely sophisticated when it comes to the use of technology. Technology has been very helpful. It was actually, I would say, invaluable during the COVID period. We use Microsoft Teams. The teams interact with each other regularly, so they can speak to each other, they can see each other, they can engage with each other. And it's very useful for that. We also use that to interact with clients. But I would say that in our business, there is no substitute for face-to-face meetings. Within the team, certainly, but particularly with clients, particularly with counterparties, particularly with market participants, we can do a certain amount with technology, but we need to go and meet people and speak to people. And our business is very much about relationships, and you can't really build and grow relationships on Teams. You can keep them going, ticking over, but you can't really build on them. So I think that technology has been very important. Maybe we're just not good at using it in an effective way. But our business in that sense is quite analog, and we need to travel, we need to speak to people, we need to meet people.
Very interesting.
And I think it's probably quite similar with the foundations as well. Yes, we use technology for communication, but actually it's really when we meet people, when we see people, when we see the institutions that we're working with, what the needs are, that we can really get a more visceral sense of what's required.
Very interesting. And Binoy, my last question to you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Given your own amazing background, the background of your family, the fact that you have been an investment banker, now running a foundation, running across multiple countries, what would you say are three learnings or three lessons from your own journey that you would want our viewers and listeners to take away?
Okay, that's interesting. If I think about three key things which are very important for me, they're probably going to sound very, very banal and trivial, and I apologize for that, but they actually are meaningful and impactful for me. One is find some good role models and learn what you can from them. For me, my most obvious role model is my grandfather. Now, I never actually met him because he passed away before I was born. But there is not one day where I don't think about him, think about what he did, and try and learn from that. So even not having met him, he is on a daily basis a role model for me. And I think that I'm a better person because of that. So I do think that role models are terribly important.
Right.
Another one is the more you put into something, the more you're going to get out of it. And again, this is probably a truism, it's probably very obvious, but I have found that very impactful. You mentioned right at the beginning that both of us are members of YPO, Young Presidents Organization. It's a fantastic organization, but you can be a recipient of the organization. You can be a member that just takes from the organization, or you can be somebody that contributes. I know you've contributed yourself an enormous amount, taking leadership positions within YPO. That's a great example. The more you put into the organization, the more you learn and the more you get out of it.
Well said.
So that for me is a second important lesson. I think a third one, and again, it's something which my grandfather and then my father and uncle have held very dear to them, is around reputation. It takes a long time to build a reputation, and one can destroy a reputation very, very quickly, very easily. So you should do justice and honor to your reputation. You should build it carefully, and you shouldn't do things which are going to jeopardize or endanger your reputation. It is something very useful.
Wonderful. And on that note, and your three wonderful lessons, find a good role model and emulate your role model as much as you possibly can. Your second one was the more you put in, the more you get out. And what I'm really hearing you say is put your hand up whenever you have an opportunity. And the third one is reputation, and for groups like yours, which have been built over 100 years, it's amazing how easy it is to destroy and how difficult it is to build. Thank you, Binoy, for taking the time to speak to me. Thank you for talking to me about your group, about the incredible work your foundation is doing. Thank you also for speaking to me about how you and your colleagues manage across multiple cultures. Congratulations again on your 100th year, and thank you for speaking to me.
It's been a great pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.